grind. There's a lawyer with a vision, one of a kind. He's the Aussie Overlaw'd. He'll fight for your rights, and he's got his own channel shining bright. From the courtroom to the web, he's got it all. Sharing legal knowledge, answering the call. He breaks it down in a language we all understand. The Aussie Overlaw'd taking a stand. With his Aussie charm and his legal know-how, he's the hero we need, showing us how. He fights for justice, no case too tough. The Aussie Overlaw'd, he's more than enough.
And good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to today's episode of To Be Advised. How are we all doing, people? There's been a lot said in the media about toxic masculinity and how it impacts on young men's minds. Frankly, I'm a little bit sick and tired of hearing about it. But what I did come across today is that an Australian university, I won't name which one just yet, Schmonash, have taken some funds from the government, a grant, I believe, allegedly, I'll double check. But I do know that the Australian government was pumping a certain level of grants into a 3-year trial. Now, I'm unsure specifically whether or not the Monash trial and the program that they're now putting into secondary schools and primary schools, I think, are teaching boys that the way that they act is not appropriate, and that, there's a whole bunch of statistics showing that having balls is wrong. So, what I thought I'd do is, given that there was also a New York Times article that came out saying that being Hulk Hogan isn't the only way to be a man, that we'd have a look at what actually is going on. Beyond that, I'll also then go into the Mona case, because that's been appealed in the Tasmanian Supreme Court, and after that, we'll see exactly where the wind takes us. You act completely inappropriately? Oh, I doubt that very much. Anyway, let's get stuck into it, people. Okay, now before I actually get stuck into watching this girl that, to be fair, she raises some important points, but at the same time, I'm concerned that they're conflating toxic masculinity with inappropriate behavior by people, which I think that may or may not be, I'm hoping I can put this into proper words by the end of this show as to how I feel about this. But the long and the short of it is that there is a certain level, in my opinion, of boys will be boys, girls will be girls. I mean, I'm sorry, but have you ever heard some of the egregious things that come out of women's mouths when they don't think that men are around? But there are traditional gender roles, there are traditional applications for both male and female for the species, and the problem that I have with toxic masculinity is that there's a general overgeneralization. I mean, arguing that the term overgeneralizes and unfairly stereotypes men is a fairly reasonable and accurate account, in my opinion. It suggests that all masculine traits are inherently toxic, which is just not true. Masculinity can be expressed in a number of healthy ways through strength, courage, and leadership, something that is sorely lacking these days. The implication of toxic masculinity also impacts on mental health. The idea that traditional masculine traits is inherently toxic discourages men frequently from seeking help for mental health issues, and men who believe that they must always be strong and stoic may be less likely to seek therapy or express their emotions, leading to higher rates of depression and suicide. Sorry, YouTube, self-yeeting. It also ignores other factors. I mean, critics argue that the concept of toxic masculinity ignores other factors that contribute to harmful behaviors, such as mental health issues, substance abuse, lack of positive role models, places the blame solely on masculinity, which, in my opinion, is quite counterproductive. The term is also seen as stigmatizing men, particularly those who exhibit traditional masculine traits. It suggests that there is something inherently wrong with being a man, which can lead to feelings of shame and guilt. I need to go and listen to Dax's To Be a Man. Well, and the funny thing here as well is there's a whole other side of the argument that people seem to be forgetting, and that's that women still have free agency as well. The concept of toxic masculinity can be seen as ignoring women's agency. It suggests that women are always victims and men are always perpetrators, which is not always the case. Women can also exhibit toxic behaviors, and men can still be victims of toxic behavior from both men and women. There was an interesting case in the news not that long ago, I think it was yesterday or today, that I read, where a certain woman had been basically abusing her husband over a 16-year period, and he won a couple of mil as a result of that one going to court. But anyway, I've gone through my jotted down notes because, as if you couldn't already tell, that I occasionally try to sound smart and try and get my point across without sounding like a dickhead. Gotta try and do that a little bit more off the cuff and less robotically. But let's get stuck into some of this stuff, and we'll do a bit more of a deep dive, and hopefully by the end of this I'll have a half decent, coherent opinion.
I had an argument with one boy in my class once. He tried to convince me that women deserve to be in the kitchen. It was such a baseless argument where he tried to quote influencers such as Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate.
I think my sister is her husband's property, yes. When a bride is walking down the aisle to marry the groom, the father walks next to her and gives her away.
Also, boys casually use offensive language as jokes.
Okay. Already having to jump in here. Andrew Tate's a fuckwit, in my opinion. And some of his opinions are incredibly ludicrous. And I think that we can all say that he is putting it on for show. It is in order to grift to the nth degree and basically to mooch off of some very vulnerable young men. What's wrong with Joe Rogan? It gets significantly worse. Hey, Joe Choi, just got a work minute. No, fair enough. And I think the trouble is that, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about in a minute, is because part of the thing that that Monash University are doing is lumping in pretty much all forms of masculinity as being toxic. They equate all views from Andrew Tate with, for example, all views from Jordan Peterson. Now, they have very different views, but basically lumping that together and saying that all views are toxic and masculinity as a whole is a concept that is dangerous, in my opinion, is bullshit. It's not only is it bullshit, it is lazy. You liked? Appreciate it. I'll tell you things that never happened for 100, Alex. Look, do I think that one of the boys in her class tried to make an argument that women should be in the kitchen? Yeah, probably. But, I mean, some of the things she goes through here, I would not class as masculine traits. I would class it as men that have been raised in an inappropriate way, but I do not believe that that is inherently because they are masculine. I believe that it is inherently because there has been a failure of parenting. There are instances here that she speaks about that, as far as I'm concerned, do not come down to whether or not you have a set of balls between your legs or not. It comes down to whether or not you were intent on committing criminal behavior and, I don't know, have never been disciplined in your life. Just confused why she used the example of Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate, but then only shows clips of Tate. They like to demonize Joe Rogan? Don't worry, we're going to see a whole bunch of shit.
One boy in school once joked that his job was a certified rapist on a TikTok.
If your kid's going onto TikTok and saying shit like that, not only does he need his head read, but you need your head knocked together. You need the pair of yous need your heads knocked together, because that is already red flag. And I don't think it's just that people are being influenced. I think that there are instances where pre-social media, you were still seeing this behavior. It's just that it's getting more attention because idiots are happy to sit in front of a camera and say this shit, as opposed to saying it in the locker room. And, you know, I don't know about those gents in chat, but I personally, when I heard that shit, I'd pull people up on it because that was a gentlemanly thing to do. And I genuinely think it's just that there's been a failure in men being raised properly as men, as opposed to lack of proper guidance, shall we say. And I don't think it's a case of masculinity being toxic. I think it's a case of, or TikTok's banned in the house. Well, there you go. So again, change history. My dad walked me down the aisle as he did for my 5 sisters. My sister-in-law, dad died many years ago, so her uncle stood in his place. Her problem is...
which is just disgusting. I know this girl who keeps a knife in her bag because she feels intimidated by a boy who keeps aggressively asking for nudes on Snapchat, and
she keeps a weapon in her bag because someone on Snapchat is aggressively asking for nudes. I think it's horrible that she feels that she is in a position where she feels physically threatened. I would question why she feels that it is better to carry a blade around than, oh, I don't know, speak to her parents, or, I don't know, the authorities. Who she's been giving her Snapchat out to, though. Look, to be fair, I didn't start this up so that we could victim blame. This is a very careful tightrope that we need to walk. I'm not going to lie about that. At what point do you just block the fucker? Just a few taps of the screen. Exactly. Is a block on Snapchat? I believe so, yeah. I personally have never used it, but if it doesn't, just uninstall the damn app. A kid their age probably shouldn't even have Snapchat.
she's scared that he might approach her in school. There are a lot of horror stories of boys pretending to be blackout drunk to fall onto girls and to grope them.
Again, failure in being raised as to what it is to be a decent bloke and a gentleman. I don't consider this to be... Also, if your kid's at a point where they're pretending to be blackout drunk at a party, A, where they're under the age of 18, so they shouldn't be drinking anyway, but B, if they've reached the age of majority and they're acting like that, well, I mean, that's a criminal offense, sweetheart. Can you raise the volume on the video a tad? I actually don't know if I can or not. No, it's maxed out, sorry. Oh, hang on, I might be able to boost it slightly. Careful on the ears, just in case.
There's also been instances where sex has been continued at parties even when the girl is passed out on the bed.
That's not toxic masculinity. That is grape. That is individuals being put into a situation where they believe that they can commit a crime. It is not the same thing. And that's what I'm worried about, this whole equating...
Aussie has donated $2.00 and says, okay, we all know what kids these days do.
Yeah. Of course it's a crime, exactly.
I see some girls and they act like broken dolls, just resigned to the reality that this is what boys are like. And they just let them subject them to horrible, violent, and often non-consensual acts. It's like they've lost their voice. They need to learn how to stand up for themselves, and we can give them the tools to help them.
Crime, drugs, drinking, etc. Yeah, but at the same time, that's not... I don't believe that that's as a result of toxic masculinity. Again, I believe that that's a failure of parenting, or that some people are just little shits, frankly. But the reason that I brought this up, constantly demonizing men and all forms of masculinities has horrible implications and consequences in the long run. Yes, wholeheartedly agree with you on that, which is why I'm bringing up this. Monash University project giving teachers tools to combat toxic masculinity has been slammed for equating Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate. A Monash University project, which aims to counter the growth of toxic masculinity in Australian classrooms, has been slammed for failing to distinguish the views of Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate. Teachers at independent and Catholic schools will be given conversation guides and role-play scripts as part of the project, which will see Monash University's arts and education faculties develop school-based early intervention programs to identify and tackle the harms of online misogyny and gender-based violence in schools. Because that is the school's place. Media release about the project, which is funded by Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, ANROS, warns toxic masculinity and misogynistic gender narratives gaining traction online are seeping into classrooms, threatening gender equality and contributing to gender-based violence. Go back to separate schools for genders. Not necessarily a bad idea, but do you honestly believe that there is anyone that's going to allow that? You've got people protesting outside single-sex schools that decide, oh, yeah, we don't actually want to see any of this crap. So, of course it all starts at home, and that's sort of what I'm getting at. I'm gonna pop out the Rumble checks. I just realized I hadn't already done it. The project specifically attributes these attitudes to both Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, describing them as notorious masculinity influences, despite very clear differences in views they promote. The lumping together of Peterson and Tate was condemned by the Institute of Public Affairs Deputy Executive Director Daniel Wild, who said any casual observer could see that there have very different views and perspectives. Mr. Wild said the lack of distinction showed terms such as toxic masculinity and misogyny have become tropes which now mean everything and nothing. Mum and dad are responsible for each child and their upbringing. Exactly. How are we going to have schools that they call gender neutral? Wait, who deleted a chat? I didn't see anything get deleted, Ken's account. I can't see anything in the background to show that anything's been deleted. So if that happened, I'm assuming that YouTube must have done it specifically. Programs aim to counter the problem they caused by demonizing masculinity for years. Yeah, pretty much. Went to a boys-only technical school. Went to crap when the girls arrived. According to ANROS, both Tate and Peterson promote content that challenges feminism's gender equality gains, reasserts patriarchal and traditional gender roles, and promote men's rights and superiority. Andrew Tate is a highly controversial British-American kickboxer and self-proclaimed misogynist whose claims about women include men cheat, women can't, the women belong to the men, and women are not meant to lead, they're meant to follow. The Romanian-based Tate, who previously ran camgirl sites in the United Kingdom, surged to prominence after using his online Hustlers University to take advantage of social media algorithms. Along with his brother Tristan, he's currently facing charges of rape and human trafficking. Both men deny the allegations. You notice how they've gone straight into Andrew Tate with this and are linking the whole toxic masculinity to, oh, someone that's engaged in sex trafficking and rape. Made a joke about my wife and sandwich making. No, you know what? I won't make the loading the dishwasher joke. In contrast, Jordan Peterson is a Canadian psychologist, author, and public speaker who encourages people to take on responsibility in their lives and not get captured by extremist ideologies. While Peterson's statement on such thing as the gender pay gap have generated controversy, his statements on relationships emphasize commitment and mutual growth. Apparently YouTube doesn't like sandwiches. When asked to give advice on how to find the right partner, Peterson has claimed that it's the wrong question to ask, and people, particularly young men, should be asking how they can develop their character to become the type of person women want to date. Despite these clear differences, the academics funding and running the Monash University study claim both Peterson and Tate are responsible for perpetuating harmful ideologies around sexism and misogyny. The project claims both men's ideas spread through the manosphere, a loosely connected network of websites and social media communities characterized by masculinist... That might be the first time I've ever heard masculinists. Ideology, anti-feminist rhetoric, and gender-based discrimination. According to the lead researcher on the project, Dr. Naomi Fitzner, Australia was at a critical junction for addressing the links between misogyny and men's use of gender-based violence. Young boys and men are increasingly absorbing misogynistic narratives online, which can shape their views on gender equality and masculinity, potentially leading to future harm and violence. The deputy director of the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Centre said. Co-chief investigator Dr. Stephanie Westcott from the Faculty of Education added female teachers have reported an alarming increase in sexual harassment and other harmful behaviours by boys in classrooms. So rather than teaching them that it's wrong to be a boy, have you tried correcting the behaviour by saying, hey, this is not acceptable? MGTOW movement's growing because of the modern feminism. I'll be honest, MGTOW at the same time, I'm like... I haven't looked too deeply into it, but at the same time, sometimes it just doesn't look... Sometimes I'm not sure if those guys even follow their own ideology, but... Dr. Westcott said teachers need effective strategies to challenge the harmful masculinist ideology that reinforces violent supportive beliefs online in the classroom and beyond. The Monash project will equip secondary school teachers with the knowledge and skills to disrupt the harmful impact of online misogyny and the manosphere in Australian schools. This will involve conducting in-depth research into the influence of the manosphere on Australian boys and young men, holding workshops with secondary school teachers and staff to identify the most effective way to deliver new learning programs aimed at combating the attitudes, and rolling out a pilot program to independent and Catholic schools. Dr. Fitzner told the Herald Sun teachers would be provided with guides to help them with tricky conversations aimed at disrupting misogynistic narratives. Backlash from the current push to feminize men. No, grade success has to have the caps lock on. Stinge, it's all good. So scared for what the future holds for the grandbabies. Yep. See, the irony is, I have a daughter. I'm more concerned that she's going to get stuck with some sniveling, whiny little soy boy bastard, and I'm effectively going to want her living under my roof until the day I die to make sure that she has a half-decent male in her life. All that Tate is saying is to be a man and stop messing around. Men and women are different. Correcting a single person's actions goes against the belief that every ill is inherent. It must be a systemic issue for the propaganda machine to work. And the issue is that the increasing view that you've got to stop men being men because the emphasis on men are bad and they need to cater to not offending women. Good way of putting it. These are tricky conversations because we're seeking to equip school teachers to call out and explain why these attitudes and values are not appropriate, she said. While these resources will be first provided to independent and Catholic schools, the eventual aim is for the resource to be available at all Australian schools. According to Mr. Wilde, the project risks undermining the goals of gender equality. Gender equality means giving women a fair go and equal treatment. It is a laudatory goal that is widely shared. However, notions of toxic masculinity are aimed at tearing men down rather than building women up, which is harmful to both sexes, the IPA director said to Sky News. Mr. Wilde cited recent comments by former Prime Minister Julia Gillard, who said campaigns for gender equality had failed to engage young men and that attacking those who disagree was counterproductive. Young men are unfairly being put upon by the activist class and are being targeted in the classroom as being the root of all social ills. This is causing deep and unnecessary division in our society, along with justifiable feelings of resentment. It is unfortunate that in Australia today, activists will view anything that could be said to lift young men up and give them confidence as a threat that needs to be squashed, resulting in demoralization and resentment. Yeah, no shit, you think?
That those same
on. No, I shouldn't have played that earlier.
Sky News All-Star Piers Morgan sat down with renowned
Joining me now
psychologist
live
and
is
author
sport
Dr.
and
Jordan
life
B.
trade.
Peterson, where he exploded about the toxic woke culture overtaking politics. Jordan Peterson unleashed on the toxic woke culture that has made people in the West selfish and ego-driven.
People are going to have to understand more consciously that the errors that they propagate morally, the acts of willful blindness, pretending that they're doing something other than they are doing, morally grandstanding, outright lying or avoiding the truth. With all this technological power at our hands, the cataclysmic consequences of those moral errors are radically magnified. And I don't see that there's an alternative to that. As we get better at doing good things faster, we simultaneously get better at doing bad things faster and at a wider scale. And, you know, I concluded decades ago, and this is partly why I stayed as a psychologist rather than, say, pursuing a political career, is that we've always known in the West that the weight of the world rests on our individual shoulders, right? The central story of the West is that each person is to take up their cross and carry it uphill, and that that's a divine calling, and that the fate of the world in some sense depends on that. And we're going to see, Pierce, in the next 30 years, we're going to see, and it might be a lot faster than that, just exactly how true that is, as the evidence for the world disrupting consequences of our hypothetically trivial errors start to become increasingly manifest, increasingly and rapidly manifest. Lay out the underlying archetypal structure of reality, you know, the endless battle between good and evil. And the most profound commentators on such battle have always concluded that the fundamental line is drawn in the human soul. And if you want to get the demons of the world under control, you better start with the demons in your own skull. And if you don't think that's enough to keep you busy, that just means you haven't looked inside with enough, courage and perspicacity. There's plenty of disorder in your own soul to occupy yourself with for the rest of your life. And this is something, we're either going to learn this voluntarily, consciously, and wisely, or we're going to be beat to death by our own stupidity. And that's going to happen quickly in many, many ways. You can see it unfolding. Well, you can see it unfolding around us now.
Dr. Peterson also said that Donald Trump could win the 2024 election if
Good. Also, it's come to my attention that I need to stop being quite so political on the channel. I mean, I'd done my best to make sure that I avoided talking about Trump and Biden. Admittedly, that went out the window when Trump got shot. But, apparently, given that I'm sitting right of center, I need to, just not give any opinion on anything that's inherently one way or the other. You can't say shit for fear of someone getting offended. Pretty much. So, but anyway.
if he's permitted to run.
Well, I think he can win, assuming that he'll be put on the ballot, as far as I've been able to tell. And God only knows how reliable the polls are, and generally not very, because the questions are usually biased unconscionably. He's certainly popular enough to win. I don't see another candidate emerging on the Republican side at the moment who poses a threat. There are some interesting people running, that's for sure. It looks to me like DeSantis is a pretty competent character, and Vivek Ramaswamy is, at minimum, very interesting and bright and quite the disruptive force. On the Democrat side, you know, Dean Phillips, who almost no one knows about, and who the Democrats are doing, what would you say, everything they can to keep it that way. He's an interesting alternative to Biden. I don't think Kennedy has a chance, although there are some things about him I like. I think Trump could win. Will that be good? It depends on what he does if he wins. It depends on the manner in which the victory takes place. It depends on whether or not the people on the more conservative side of the spectrum are able to extend a welcoming hand to those who are more on the progressive side. And it certainly depends on whether those on the progressive side are willing to dispense with some of the ideological stupidity that possesses them, that is generating an endless sequence of unnecessary culture war.
Dr. Peterson then slammed the left for their pathological victim narrative.
The left in particular has become 100% preoccupied with the most pathological possible political narrative, which is essentially a victim-victimizer story. that you can understand every element of social interaction among humans, from marriage upwards to the political, in terms of who's got the power, who's the oppressed. And there's nothing in that but an endless recipe for not only for the most bitter of soul-devouring resentments, but for the application of any form of vengeance imaginable. I can't imagine.
It just occurred to me watching Pierce's facing the nodding and whatever, that the jumping and all that sort of thing actually is on Peterson's end. And I was sitting there thinking, is this video just that badly edited? Wait, no, Pierce is sitting there nodding in real time. Okay, fair enough.
This is something that possesses the universities as well. There's nothing more toxic than a victim-victimized narrative. And that certainly possesses the radical left in particular to the nth degree. And there's nothing in that but disaster.
Dr. Peterson also berated the left for spreading false claims about Donald Trump.
Trump is standing against, especially the radicals. He's being put in a position where he more or less de facto has to stand against that kind of smothering, quasi-maternal, devouring sympathy that's part and parcel of being allied with the victims. And so part of that's an ideological problem. I would also say that I believe that there has been no political figure, certainly in my living memory, with the possible exception of Richard Nixon, who's been vilified more thoroughly and also more falsely than Trump. And I would point to the idiot conclusion of Russian collusion, especially with regards to the Hunter Biden laptop, as evidence in that regard. You know, I mean, Trump has no shortage of flaws, let's say, a statement that can be said of all of us. But apart from vicious criticism with regard to those faults, there has been an absolute surfeit of devastating criticism and persecution for faults that are not real. And, you know, it isn't obvious to me how much a person can...
Okay, how much of this is going to be about Trump and the politics? Because, I mean, that was supposed to be talking about the woke stuff. I don't really want to...
take without... Trump did go into the... He's an old guy, you know, and he's bombastic. And he's under a lot of pressure. And so... And all the lies that have been generated to blacken his name have made him reprehensible so that you can blacken their name. And it's certainly the case that the Democrats have done on the facts of the matter at hand with regard to the conflict in Israel to offer one, wouldn't I? Because in lives, you know, doesn't hurt them if all those innocent people die. So that's a dreadful situation. If I was in Israel's shoes, I suppose I would likely do much the same as they are doing.
It was specifically
with one possible coda, which is that as Israel becomes more...
something in there about...
I felt, well, this is the testimony in D.C. of the 3 university presidents. I thought 2 things. I thought it's a complete bloody miracle that these people who've been clamoring for the restriction of free speech on the basis of oppression and harm can't admit that calls for the genocide of Jews, no matter how arguably tangential, don't violate these incredibly restrictive free speech codes, which they themselves have been screeching about like mad harpies for decades. So that was just a bloody miracle of blind stupidity. And it was a catastrophe, as far as I was concerned, that it characterized particularly MIT and Harvard, because those were great interest as well. I say that with no satisfaction whatsoever. I worked at Harvard for 6 years, but only possible way forward. You know, like, could Harvard...
That's just that's just going to derail the stream if I'm not careful. So, where are we? Okay, back to this. New project will help teachers tackle toxic masculinity in schools. This is the actual news article put out by Monash themselves. This was today, actually. Toxic masculinity and misogynistic gender narratives are gaining traction online and in Australian classrooms, threatening gender equality and contributing to gender-based violence. A new project from Monash University aims to support secondary school teachers to tackle the influence of these harmful online ideologies on young boys and men. Oh, I don't know. How about in secondary school, if you're going to tackle it in schools, how about we go back to, I don't know, having a civics class, having social studies class, you know, the things where people actually learnt how to engage with people and, you know, be proper. I mean, it used to be a time when we had etiquette classes, where we had the time set aside to learn how to be a decent human being. And yeah, sure, a lot of that used to come from people going to church. Not a lot of people do that anymore. As I've said on multiple occasions, I'm not particularly religious. But here's the thing. I still had a decent enough upbringing that I am a decent person. So, rather than plastering propaganda at individuals, how about you sit people down and give them the tools to grow into well-rounded young men, rather than just hitting them in the face and saying, you have testicles, you are bad. Can we think about maybe doing that? Great if they taught science in schools instead of gender diversion crap. Well, the 2-year project funded by Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety will see a collaboration between Monash's arts and education faculties to establish school-based early intervention programs to identify and tackle the harms of online misogyny and gender-based violence in schools. Notorious masculinity influencers or manfluencers. Manfluencers! Oh, hang on.
Manfluencers.
Like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson are perpetuating harmful ideologies around sexism and misogyny, which are filtering through to boys and young men's behaviour in the classroom. These men represent a broader online community, sometimes called the manosphere. Hang on.
The manosphere.
A loosely connected network of websites and social media communities characterized by masculinist... How did I never actually understand... I've heard the word feminist however many times since I was a young boy. Today is the first day I have come across the word masculinist. Watch out for Tim the Tall Man and Al Borland, those toxic bastards. Yep. Yes, and they're back on Andrew Tate. Excuse me. Masculinist ideology, anti-feminist rhetoric, and gender-based discrimination. Lead researcher Dr. Naomi Fitzer, Deputy Director of the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Center, said the increased influence of misogynistic discourse in schools is particularly worrying given the links between this ideology and men's use of gender-based violence. Young boys and men are increasingly absorbing misogynistic narratives online, which can shape their views on gender equality and masculinity, potentially leading to future harm and violence. Peterson, a manfluencer, sure, okay, of course, lefties don't understand what he's saying, or has said in his books. Young boys and men are increasingly... Oh, I read that. We're at a critical juncture for addressing the links between misogyny and men's use of gender-based violence. Our research-backed project aims to prevent the dangerous ideologies from taking root and to support teachers in creating safer, more equitable classrooms. Do you think maybe people are turning towards other people online because they're getting radical feminism shoved down their necks and feel like their views are inherently bad just because? Yes. Anti-feminist rhetoric, that's all you need to read to understand their entire viewpoint. Yep. Shared by DC Drano, a bunch of Wyoming toxic masculinity rescuing elk trapped in a frozen lake. Not a feminist or social worker to be found. See, here's the thing. What this boils down to is they're basically saying that men engaging in what would be considered traditionally bonding time, like hunting or going out in a group and chopping firewood, or men with balls will wear them as earrings and called a shim. What a load of shit. To me, they're missing the point. Because if these boys had proper counterintuitive, not counterintuitive, I'm not sure what the right word there would be. If they had the appropriate counter education and were raised properly, it wouldn't matter if they came across all these influences and shit like that, because even if it did take root, they'd know you don't lay hands on a woman. You don't lay hands on a child. You don't lay hands on each other unless someone has tried to do either of the former. about just don't be a dick to each other that worked in my area? Exactly. Because it's simple decency that just needs to be instilled. They just want to normalize men in women's skirts. I think they've already done that. For real toxic masculinity, for real toxicity, join Aussie's Discord. It's not run by teens. Oh, bite me, Stingy. No, I think I'm actually going to close down the Discord, honestly. I don't have time to make it what I want it to be, and yeah. Don't throw hands unless you need to, then you win. Simple as that. Exactly. The issue with that video in particular is that it focuses so much on men being toxic and women not feeling safe, not feeling like they can speak up and not having a voice. Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that it completely avoids the issue of female agency. Men were taught to be respectable doesn't mean they're not a man. Exactly. Exactly. Whole gender thing is a war against self-sufficiency. They want you dependent on the system for basic needs. A traditional nuclear family is a threat to the Marxist ideology. Boom, boom, boom. The project will involve 3 phases over 18 months. The first phase involves in-depth research into the influence of the manosphere content on Australian boys and young men. This data will guide focus groups with young Australians to explore their interactions with manosphere content both online and offline. In the second phase, workshops with secondary school staff across Australia will identify the most effective content and delivery methods for a new pilot professional learning program addressing the manosphere's classroom impact. The final phase will pilot and evaluate the program with teachers, ensuring it meets their needs and effectively combats toxic masculinity in schools. Bite Me Stingy merch come and win. You know, it couldn't hurt to actually put some Bite Me... Oh, I could use the now's not the time stingy thing on a shirt. I could do that. Which reminds me, someone remind me when I get to the halfway grifter that I should bring up the merch store and show everyone what's available. Final phase, what do we do? Co-chief investigator Dr. Stephanie Westcott from the Faculty of Education said the project will form a crucial part of supporting teachers to tackle misogynistic discourses in their classrooms and create safer spaces. What about all the misandrous stuff that goes on from women and they happen to, I don't know, make the... How do we know when you're halfway? That's actually a good point. It's actually a really good point. Where some people had it good for too long and they're about to find out why things were how they were. Well, it's the saying. Hard situations create hard men create soft situations create soft men. Right. I think we're seeing a whole bunch of softies coming up that it's just not going to end well, honestly. Australian women teachers have described an alarming increase in sexual harassment and other harmful behaviours by boys in classrooms, often linked to narratives and ideologies unmistakably derived from the manosphere content. We need effective strategies for teachers to challenge this harmful masculinist ideology that reinforces violent supportive beliefs online in the classroom and beyond. While there's an increasing investment in respectful relationships and consent education in schools, professional development for teachers is lacking. I'm not denying that teaching consent education in schools is important. The simple fact of the matter is, by the time they're teaching consent in schools, it's already too late for that shit. Because these little turds are either already fuckwits to the point where it's not gonna matter, or the education system as a whole has failed them. I mean, God forbid blokes should be trained to be blokes and gentlemen. It's not difficult. There's just very few real men nowadays, that's the problem. Yep. Go back to old school learning, wouldn't that cause an uproar? Oh yeah. Tell me about it. Project will equip secondary school teachers with knowledge and skills to disrupt the harmful impact of online misogyny in the manosphere in Australian schools. Researchers hope the findings and the outcomes from the project will go beyond classrooms, contributing to national, state, and territory policy planning to reduce the prevalence and impact of gender-based violence. All of this is coming about because they genuinely think this is going to be the way that they reduce the instances of domestic violence and rape. It's not going to. Good fucking luck with that. Because they're putting so much effort into the wrong area, in my opinion. That's just the excuse for it. Yeah, look, you're probably right there, Trenton, honestly. All right. Where are we? Oh, yes, hang on. Men with toxic masculinity are more likely to make sexual advances without consent. How do you expect there to be proper real men out there when you're pushing this shit in school about women being afraid and not having a voice and men being too masculine? Let's just look through this one. And Burberries, you specifically can tell me when you think we reach the point of this article where we can all call bullshit. No means no when it comes to sex, but what happens when a woman makes more passive responses to a sexual advance? According to new research from Binghamton University, men differ in how they interpret these types of responses, and men who display hostile masculinity, commonly known as toxic masculinity, tend to act on them regardless of whether or not they think it's consensual. A team of researchers, including a psychology professor, Richard Matson, and graduate student Michael Shaw, asked men between the ages of 18 to 25 to respond to hypothetical sexual hookup situations in which... You notice how it all goes back to sexuality as well? Who defines toxic masculinity? That's the damn good question. Because at this point, as it said in the previous article, it has become a catch-all for everything and nothing. The title of the article, we can call BS from there. Hypothetical sexual hookup situations in which women respond passively to a sexual advance, meaning the woman does not express an overt verbal or behavioral response to indicate consent to increase the level of physical intimacy. The team then surveyed how consensual each man perceived the situation to be, as well as how he would be likely to behave. A passive response to a sexual advance is a normative indicator of consent, but also might reflect distress or fear, and whether men are able to differentiate between the two during a hookup is important to explore, said Matson. The team found that men varied in their perception of passive responses in terms of consent, and the level of perceived consent was strongly linked to an increased likelihood of continuing or advancing sexual behavior. If the bloke perceives that it's okay for him to continue doing what he's doing, he continues the interaction. Yes, and dogs drool when they see a bone. What the fuck is wrong with you? The biggest takeaway is that men differed in how they interpreted an ambiguous female response to their sexual advances with respect to the perception of consent, which in turn influenced their sexual decisions, said Matson. But certain types of men, such as those with high toxic masculine traits, tended to view situations as more consensual and reported that they would escalate the level of intimacy, regardless of whether or not they thought it was consensual. Yeah. Okay. Because if you're getting hot and heavy under the covers or on the couch, and you think you've been given the green light, you kind of assume that if you're going to, like... Ambiguous is the key term, yeah. Diluting the word for YouTube, yeah. There is a word called no. Use it. I knew exactly what minefield I was walking myself into then, and I felt the need to stop mid-sentence. Generally, this form of masculinity refers to individuals who experience a need for sexual dominance over women, who are inclined towards violence and hostile attitudes regarding women, and accept great myths which are stereotypical beliefs about SA and why it occurs, said Shaw. There you go. So this is a completely differing definition as to what toxic masculinity is. If you engage in toxic masculinity, then you're going to be individuals who need sexual dominance over women and who are inclined towards violence. Never had to be taught about consent. It was just part of the seemingly rare thing called common sense. Yep. Individuals with high levels of hostile masculinity are distrustful of others in romantic relationships and prioritizing aggressive and masculine interpersonal behaviors for their own security. Other traits such as psychopathy, narcissism, and callous or unemotional orientations towards others tend to regularly present in individuals with hostile masculinity. Okay, so tell me this. How the hell does one become a psychopath from engaging in by watching TikToks or listening to Jordan Peterson talk? Or hell, even by listening to Andrew Tate talk? Because isn't being a psychopath and narcissism and being unemotional, aren't the majority of those things, I don't know, ingrained in the way that your brain works? Like, I know that they can be gained over time, but this still seems like some bullshit. Maybe kids just don't know how to read a room these days, probably being part of the general table room conversation. They're in the living room on their own, in their own thoughts without interaction. Same goes for other situations where you don't say anything or don't expect you to read minds. Oh, there's plenty of women that expect you to read a mind, Berries, let's be honest. Don't like the way he acts, so he's toxic. Problem is that they define toxic so vaguely that it encompasses every interaction. Pathology of the mind. Let's put it this way. If you ask a woman what she feels like eating and she says she doesn't mind, but then continues to say no to every cuisine you say, you can't read their mind. I freaking hate that. That's why I've just started picking out dinner. You know what? Maybe I embody a level of toxic masculinity because I pick what we're having for dinner because I get sick and tired of the over and over again. Do you want this? No. Do you want this? No. Do you want this? No. Reminds me of 1984 news speaker controlled language, a form of thought control. Yep. As a result, individuals with hostile masculinity are at a higher risk of engaging in SA. Though passive responses indicating tension or the use of alcohol led to more conservative estimations of consent. No shit, did you see that? If the responses indicated that the woman was uncomfortable or that she was drunk, the men were more conservative as to whether or not they thought she was consenting. Notice how they're skewing what they're talking about, the passive responses? So maybe they're just sitting on a couch, engaging in a little bit of light petting, and, you know, he moves a hand or a boob or something and she makes a noise. It's unambiguous to him. But it's like, and he's like, okay, do we proceed? Do we continue? Do I back off? Do I whatever? And yet, if she froze up, or if she was drunk or whatever, the guys are backing off. Interesting how they've skewed that. However, men did not seem to entirely rule out escalating sexual intimacy in either case. Well, yeah, because I don't know, if she's a virgin, if he's a virgin, they might be tense about it. I mean, if she freezes up and she's acting tense, but she goes, yes, I really want to do this, I'm pretty sure they're going to continue the situation, you know? Aussie reading smut there. Let me put it this way. When I was younger, it's significantly easier to get a hold of written literature than it is images when you're under the age of 18. Let's put it that way. I'm letting way too much out there, aren't I? Anyway, moreover, greater levels of intimacy already attained and shared alcohol consumption were associated with greater estimates of consent. Well, no shit. If you're in a long-term relationship with your girlfriend and you've already rooted on a bunch of occasions, you're going to assume that there's a slightly greater level of consent there if you're already engaging in certain acts. And look how they've skewed this one. If it was just her that was drinking, they're thinking, okay, there's a lack of consent there. But if we've both been drinking, maybe they're into it. Maybe they're whatever else. I don't know. That reminds me of the ad that you see occasionally go on Twitter. And it's, they were both drinking, they both had sex, the next day he was charged with rape. Got to read the entire 1984 Animal Farm in the Jungle. Yeah, probably couldn't hurt. Suggesting that how passive response is interpreted can be influenced by characteristics of the situation. No shit, you think? Perceptions of consent had less to do with extant circumstances and far greater to do with the type of man making the decision, he said. More specifically, those elevated on toxic masculine traits or that favored impersonal sex. Oh, God. That's really how they're phrasing that. Tended to perceive the situation as more consensual, irrespective of what was specifically occurring. Moreover, toxic masculine characteristics strongly predicted a man's decision-making regardless of whether or not they perceived the situation to be consensual. Considered together, a passive sexual response from a woman may be interpreted very differently in terms of consent by different kinds of men and in different situations. This is important because these perceptions appear to influence men's sexual decision-making, but our findings support the notion that in many cases the men are knowingly transgressive. You mean to tell me that a horny bloke's going to push his luck until a woman says no? Again, dog, bone, drooling. Fuck me, I feel sorry for the kids today, how complicated the world's become. Oh, you got no idea, Cakes Boo. You got no idea. He also said that it was important to differentiate traditional masculinity from its toxic counterpart. The former entails a see, but here's the okay, I will give them some credit here because they are differentiating between traditional masculinity and toxic masculinity, where for the most part, if it's from a feminist perspective these days, I feel like all masculinity is considered toxic. When I imagine traditional masculinity, I'm imagining burly lumberjack going out and making ends meet. Maybe, I don't know, killing a beaver and taking the tail or whatever else. A high-priced lawyer or doctor working hard to provide for his family and friends. Damn, you know, that's really depressing. Actually, no, never mind, I'll come back to that. Still haven't defined toxic, though. It sounds like it's just past referring to all masculinity. Why have consent from communication, let alone other activities? Alright, the former entails a host of traits. Emotional resilience and role expectations, such as a provider, can be quite positive, whereas the latter is a narrow set of characteristics including psychopathic tendencies, hostility towards women, and men's need for affirmation for his masculine bona fides through the domination of weaker, more valuable individuals. Okay, that's fine. You've gone through and defined toxic masculinity 3/4 of the way through the article, and that is not something that anyone else does. Why does everyone think of hairy lumberjacks when they mention masculinity? Oh, I don't know. Because I imagine Burley from The Simpsons when Marge is daydreaming. All about who defines the words. Men playing in women's sports is toxic masculinity to some people, including myself. Oh. Apparently Stingy grabbed the ad for me, which is quite appreciated. Jake was drunk. Josie was drunk. Jake and Josie hooked up. Josie could not consent. The next day, Jake is charged with rape. A woman who is intoxicated cannot give her legal consent for sex, so proceeding under these circumstances is a crime. It only takes a single day to ruin your life. Think about it and be responsible. Tell me why in the hell the pair of them shouldn't have been charged. Not chopping my own firewood, dag nabbit. See, at least this is an interesting definition of toxic masculinity. Because emotional resilience and role expectations in traditional masculinity is great. But then they've got, you know, being a psychopath, being hostile towards women, needing attention and affirmation for being masculine. Well, personally, I think I'd take that one still and put it into traditional masculinity because men like to be appreciated. So, women dress up as slutty lumberjacks for Halloween. Yeah, if anyone's swinging an axe, they're not getting anywhere near me. Considered together, it's a preference for self-serving hierarchical relationships, a lack of concern for the well-being of others, and the need to demonstrate one is a real man that link toxic masculinity to all forms of aggression, including sexual assault. The researchers are conducting more work in this realm going forward. Shaw is undertaking research that uses brain stimulation and imaging approaches to experimentally test theoretical models of sexual decision-making with a focus on emotional pathways. Based on the article's definition, would a woman using her feminine wiles be considered toxic femininity? No. Because that's not that's not their definition of toxic femininity. What they're saying is toxic is if a bunch of women got together and taught her how to basically use that to take advantage of a man. And then, you know, saying no when she... Actually, you know what? No, in that instance, toxic femininity might even be if she says yes. Because then she gets slut-shamed. And that's toxic. All the comments are just vile women. You reckon? So this is Monash's actual project. The Masculinities Project. Delivered in person at Clayton campus, the project engages men and men and gender diverse students. Men and gender diverse students. Not women, just men and gender diverse students. In transforming dominant notions of masculinities as a mean of promoting gender equality and preventing gender-based violence. I don't understand why they keep focusing on violence. If they taught boys to be proper men, the violence shit would go out the window irrespective of what they were viewing on TikTok. The project aims to enhance the understanding of the role of men and gender-diverse individuals in gender-based violence prevention and gender equality. Give students the opportunity to learn practical methods of challenging stereotype constructions of masculinity and femininity, provide a safe and supporting environment for men and gender-diverse students to talk about masculinity, discuss social attitudes and expectations, and explore ways of engaging in healthy and non-conforming masculinities. Acknowledge and encourage gender-equitable attributes of men and gender-diverse students, challenge the dominant forms and patterns of masculinity that drive gender-based violence. Now, here's a bunch of... Have you ever worked in a female-dominated environment? Dude, sorry, Gimba, apologies. That was just me. Apologies for assuming your gender. That's just the way that I interact when I go, holy shit, are you aware of this? I worked as a legal secretary for like 2 years during law school. YouTube is censoring toxic femininity? Are you serious? No way. If you want to see toxic femininity, there's a attractive lumberjack guy on Instagram who just chops wood in a single top. All the comments are just vile women. Huh. You said that 3 times. Young men aged 18 to 30, 80 to 30, who strongly agree with rigid gender stereotypes report poorer levels of mental health, engage in risky drinking, are more likely to be in car accidents, and report committing acts of violence, online bullying, and sexual harassment, according to the Men's Project from 2018. You know what a counterpoint to that is? A counterpoint is that the men that have their masculinity squashed and are being told that they are that they should be shamed and be whatever. So you can go on about that, but you've also got 80% of men are self-yeeting. Of all the people that self-yeet, as a good portion of that, it's because of this. Tell me what you like, I answered all a lot worse. Oh, fair enough. I laugh with what a woman can hide with what clothing I make, and when you get them alone and sexy, they turn into Mrs. Sherman Clump. Gender-based violence, in which sense I've witnessed women be more violent. Oh, no, AP, for the most part, gender-based violence, when they talk about it here, is men hitting women. Or men hitting other men. Dude's correct? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. 1 in 6 women and 1 in 16 men have experienced physical and or sexual violence from a current or previous cohabitating partner. Research shows that a large percentage of young Australian men believe and feel pressure to be self-sufficient, tough, physically attractive in order to be successful, breadwinners of families, hypersexual, and aggressive and controlling. Evidence demonstrates the fact that masculinity is not innate or fixed. It's a dynamic construct that shifts and changes over time and place. Dominant forms of masculinity intersect with gender inequality and other structural inequalities and social disadvantages such as gender-based violence. Hey Rachel, glad you're here. That's BA because there are plenty of men that have been physically and mentally abused by women. Boom, it's your business. Heard. And these are just the public ones that make it into court. Morning, Ginger. I was gonna play the video, but I just, like, I was thinking that maybe... What the fuck is that? What is this shit? Hang on.
Stingy has donated $5 and says for Dak's video in DM at end. Worth it with day's topic.
Oh, that's
Just
officially...
so you can cut it out if have to.
Oh, fair enough. That's a $5 super chat, so that is officially coming off the doggo list. That puts us $45 away from Dogcam. Thank you very much for that, Stingy. And guys, I now have a thing to keep track of Dogcam. Unfortunately, chats under $5 do not count because the button that I press counts down in by fives. So, given that I can't keep track, anything from $5 and up is gonna be counted towards it. We researched misogynistic radicalization. Here's what parents of boys should know, according to Monash University. This one's going to be interesting. Many parents are worried about their children using social media, but the concerns tend to focus on privacy, exposure to illicit material, and contact with strangers. As researchers looking at sexism and misogyny in Australian schools and the influence of social media, we also think that it's important for parents to understand how algorithms work. These can drive misogynistic content towards boys and young men and make extreme views seem normal. Researchers are increasingly studying how social media can amplify social and political divisions, and also showing how these platforms spread prejudice, hate speech, and misinformation. You identify as a bitch? Trying to channel the woke mind. Maybe not. At the same time, researchers are identifying a growing divide between young men and women in their attitudes towards gender equality. Our own research has found a disturbing increase in sexism, sexual harassment, and misogyny in Australian schools. This includes examples of, maybe it's because, I don't know, boys are being told that they, because of what they have between their legs, that they're pieces of shit and don't deserve to get ahead in life, and that, I don't know. They get a little bit resentful because they feel like other genders are getting special treatment. Just saying. And, like, I can only speak for when I was going through school, and frankly, even back then, I saw a little bit of it. I can only imagine what it's like today. Misread that as fish. You identify as a fish. So you also identify as a bee. Have you stung any dogs lately? Examples include boys physically intimidating women teachers in schools. Well, that shit just shouldn't be happening. Gaslighting them. How the fuck do you gaslight a teacher? Saying that they're hysterical, describing gender equality as myths, and saying things like, "Miss, your boobs look really big today." I don't think that has anything to do with toxic masculinity as it does these boys not being properly parented. Again, that's an issue to me. Similar examples emerged from other Australian research this year. Our research done via interviews with Australian teachers suggests that the views are influenced by the rise of figures from the manosphere.
The manosphere!
A collection of extreme men's communities that are anti-women on social media. My boobs look big today? Really? I was feeling a little bit emotional, so maybe that'll... Why did I even play into that? My son's in elementary school, they're being taught a file can hit them, but they can't hit back to defend themselves. I called the school because girls were bullying him, and I said, well, in our house, it doesn't matter who's hitting you, have the right to defend yourself. Abso-fucking-lutely. And you know what? That is something that I specifically said to Scarlett as well. I don't care who's hitting you, boy or girl. They hit you first. I expect you to finish it. Not now, Stingy. Research done via interviews with Australian teachers suggests the views are influenced by the rise of the manosphere on social media. I don't really care about the algorithm stuff. Recent studies shown us that boys and young men are being fed misogynistic content. Do you think maybe there's a reason why that stuff continues to be popular, though? Equal rights, equal fights? No, equal rights, equal lefts. It showed boys and young men were lured to the manosphere through recommended features that pop up On YouTube Shorts, which feature shorter videos, the phenomenon was worse. The study found that the algorithm was seen to optimize more aggressively in response to user behavior and show more extreme videos within a relatively brief period of time. You think maybe it's just got to do with, oh, I don't know, they sit there and watch them over and over again because they like what they're hearing, because they feel like they've been disenfranchised? Researchers created 10 fake profiles for TikTok and YouTube Shorts on 10 blanks. Oh, here we go. This is going to be the same sort of shit about the manipulating the algorithm so that certain types of content show up more frequently. On the two platforms, the researchers created for 16 and 18-year-old boys sought content typically associated with masculine gender norms for their age, such as gym, sport, and video games. A 16 and 18-year-old boy who sought manosphere content and one blank control account. Misogynist manosphere content was sent to users regardless of whether those accounts actively searched for it.
Hakesboo has donated $14.99 and says, H, have we got the stats in these % private are to put love schools?
Okay, one thing. It puts $35 away from Dogcam. Have we got the stats in these private... No, because this was announced today. So they're putting it into independent schools and into Catholic schools. We don't specifically have stats as to what's being done as of yet. Or if you're talking about whether or not this is in public school versus private school, the stats probably are somewhere, but then they have deliberately not included them in the findings or in the articles. Probably should have actually looked up that. Private to public, not all the shit. Oh, private versus public. Okay, that makes sense. We can have a look in a minute. Let me just get through this and I'll see whether or not I can pull something up. But that's actually a really good point. Oh, hang on, that was 15. Sorry. That puts us $30 from Doggo Cam. Toxic society exists maybe, but to single out males as political fodder. Yep. Back in my day, men were more worried about what side it hung, if they were a lefty or a righty. All the LGBTQ, anti-white, and man-hating content's being pushed. At the moment, I'm not going to lie, I feel like if you opened up the dictionary and looked up Public Enemy #1, you'd see a picture of my face. Hey, Bernice. All accounts were presented with masculinist, extremist, and anti-feminist content, and the frequency increased once their account demonstrated interest or engagement. No shit, because that's how it's designed to work. If you like a video, it shows you more. For fuck's sake, the way that the YouTube algorithm is very specific. If I stop and look at one vidIQ video about making my channel better or things I can do to improve things, quite simply, I will then get video after video after video of here's how to make your channel blow up. Here's how to make better content for people. Here's how to do all this, this, and this. And I wound up spending 2 hours learning about shit that makes no difference whatsoever, even when I try it. But the point is, no shit, Sherlock. Social media is designed so that if you like something, you are presented more of that because you are more likely to engage and spend more time on the platform, and that is what they want. My dictionary, you're under daddy. Oh, God. How does misogynist content radicalize boys? Because they don't have a father stepping in and teaching them what's right and wrong. We believe what's occurring is very serious. In our research, we use the term misogynist radicalization to describe what is happening to some boys and young men. The phrase was selected to capture a stark and sudden shift in boys' attitudes and behaviors towards women and girls in Australian schools, which teachers report occurred at return from lockdown and remote schooling. Oh, you mean after being at home and away from school, there was... So, hang on. You're telling me that after being locked up and away from school during COVID and all that sort of stuff during the lockdowns, where they were away from left-wing propaganda that was pushing gender equality and all that sort of stuff, you saw that there was a backlash and boys wanted to be boys and boys wanted to engage in typical male shit? Like, am I supposed to actually be shocked by that? Had to tell a principal if one student wasn't kept away from him, I'll go to the police and file a police report against her and file for a restraining order. They don't like that. My dad taught me you F around, you find out. Yep. Although radicalization is typically used to refer to the process of being recruited to religious or political terrorist ideology, put that through your brains, people. They're equating masculinity with terrorism. That it is an ideology that is so fucked in the head that it is damaging to society. Can you actually do an egg in an air fryer? I never even thought of that. I once tried the pancake thing because I've watched the YouTube short and I was like, hey, does this actually work? No, it does not. At the same time, incel or involuntary celibate community is also being seen as a possible terroristic threat. Incels, who are mostly boys and men, blame or resent women for their own inability to find a sexual partner. We also know misogyny perpetuates gender inequality and biases that underpin violence against women. But we're not suggesting boys and young people who are influenced by extremist. Here we go. Now we've gone from toxic to extremist. Extremist ideologies will all become violent or recruited to other extremist groups. It's important to consider misogyny as both a form of extremism as an ideology. Femcell is now a thing too. Yeah, exactly, Jim. Oh, actually, hang on. I should zoom in on this a little bit. Sorry, it makes more sense that Joe said that she needed an eye test. Sorry. Which is ironic because I'm almost at the end of the article too. Research shows young people who view misogynistic content are likely to harbour unhealthy views of relationships. A 2024 UK study on teenagers also found manfluencer Andrew Tate's content is emotionally engaging for boys and young men. It encourages feelings of fear and anger, as well as a belief in myths about gender equality. Indiscriminately using the label of toxic masculinity onto select behaviours that's very much subjective in nature is not wise for men or society. Nope. And it is a generalistic term where they need to pull their heads out of their asses, frankly, because it's disgusting. So what can parents do? An outright ban for young people is not necessarily the right step to take, even if such a ban could work. Research tells us that social media is an important space for young men to explore their identities, interests, and establish connections with others. So we need education for both for parents and young people about how algorithms shape the feeds of young people's social media accounts and how this content can deliberately exploit their emotions and beliefs. Or better yet, be a parent. Raise your kids, instill values in them yourself, and not expect the schools or social media to do it for you. That would be the great way to do it. Men, teach your sons to respect women, but to respect themselves as well. Teach that if there is a right hook, there is an equal left. Teach that you hold the door open and you be polite. It's not that fucking difficult. When did it become such a problem for us to raise men to be gentlemen? When did that go out the window? They say things like all men are trash and kill all men. One key thing parents can do is initiate open, respectful conversations with their children about what they're viewing online. These conversations should be free of judgment or reprimand and allow children to describe what they're seeing and why it might interest them. It sucks because this might just be the most level-headed stuff that's actually in this. Open-ended questions that encourage your child to express their views are a good place to start. For example, can you tell me a bit about X? What's interesting about their content? Judgment-free conversations are important so young people don't fear bringing up difficult experiences. If you're going to be critical of something, try to do this together with children contributing to explanations of whether specific content can be harmful and to whom. You can also talk about the implication of echo chambers and how these are generated by algorithms. No shit, I will say this, people. Echo chambers are very dangerous. There is a specific reason why I still subscribe to individuals on X and YouTube who hold views that are counter to my own personal opinions. So A, I can understand what their opinions are and dissect them myself as to why they're morons. I was going to go with moronic, then I don't know why I went with morons. But, like, don't find yourself in an echo chamber, is all I'm saying. The academic community is an echo chamber for the most part, yeah. Kids have always known our door is always open and always have come to me with their days, good days, bad things. They're going through and even questions about anything. Yeah, which is exactly how I want my relationship with my daughter to be. Hell, that's how I want the relationship with the dog to be. Also, lots of useful organizations providing specific advice for parents regarding algorithms and general online safety. And then they just go on about watching and listening. Reminds me of my mother-in-law asked if I got up at 4 a.m. to make my husband sandwiches for lunch. I said, fuck no, he knows how to butter bread. See, there's an account on Twitter, The Art of Manliness. And it's just everyday shit that blokes should know how to do. Or on YouTube, things I wish my father taught me. You know, things like that. It's like the following and For You on X are two totally different worlds. Yes, they are. They really are. I encourage you to scroll through both if you're ever, if you're just on your phone doom scrolling or whatever. I encourage you to switch between both and just see what's different. I have a stepdaughter and a stepson, giving them a lot of guidance, and I love nothing more to see them succeed. Single parenting can be very toxic using the same standards. This 17 pages. Oh, fuck that. I ain't reading this entire thing. Okay, what's the abstract on it? Yeah, this was this year. There is a growing visibility of online man-influencers who espouse extreme masculine ideals and share them with their audiences of boys and young men. Taking this phenomenon as a launchpad, we join the tradition of research that exposes sexism in schools and theorizes girls' and women's experience of working within and against masculine hegemony. Drawing on qualitative interviews with 30 women teachers in Australia, we suggest the sexism identified in early research endures in schools today, resurrected in part by the ubiquity and influence of one specific misogynist man-influencer, Andrew Tate. So they really did focus on Andrew Tate in this. Similar to those channels, Dad, How Do I? Yeah, I love those sorts of channels. I really do. There's one video. I think it was like Blue Peter back in the 70s or the 80s. And I watch it periodically because it reminds me so much of my old man. And it's about how to replace a glass window. And it's done in such a comedy way, but I have no idea why. But the guy doing it just reminds me of my dad so much. Employing Cornell's hegemonic masculinity, we suggest boys' sexist practices towards their teachers and girls form part of a strategy of gender inequality legitimization, stabilizing and reinvigorating a regressive male supremacy. These behaviors represent a backlash from boys and men who perceive a loss of gendered power in the post-Me Too era and have implications for girls and women in school. I don't really care about your methods. Where's the conclusion? Disclosure statement, no potential conflict of interest. Funding supported by Monash. Articles identified 3 strands indicating a resurgence of male supremacy and the advancement of masculinist hegemony in Australian schools. Firstly, we explored the weaponized invocation of Tate, his tropes and ideology in classrooms as provocations. Second, we detailed instances of male supremacy enacted in interactions in the classroom and the schoolyard. And finally, we documented sustained sexual harassment perpetrated against women, teachers, and girls. The adoption of Tate's ideology about men's victimhood in relation to a perceived inequitable power distribution relative to women, his belief in women's inherent inferiority to men, and the alignment of rampant wealth and consumption with masculine identity have discernible implications for women and girls in school. While we acknowledge that such findings are enduring problems of social climate of schools and classrooms, and of unequal gender relations, broadly teachers uniformly observe that in the last 2 years, boys' problematic behaviour has become significantly more pervasive, more perverse, more targeted, and more brazen. While not capturing a variety of masculinities within participating schools, our findings reflect a nevertheless discernible and troubling pattern of hegemonic masculinity. Stop using buzzwords. Extremism on both sides causes things to get more and more extreme. Yes. Funny how it marks Me Too as an error, as if it didn't vanish like a fart in the wind. Alright, I'm going to break here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to grift a little bit. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, double check whether or not you're still subscribed. Thank you to everybody that already has. This is not the end of the show. I'm aware that I usually open my ending like this. But what we are going to do is I'm going to show off my merch store. Because I haven't done that in a while. And I need to put some new stuff up. So, waiting. Boosh is working, apparently. So, people, over at AussieOverlaw'dmerch.com. Hang on, where's the button? Where you can find your hoodies, stickers, t-shirts, mugs with the logo on, which I'm now told is on the wrong side. We also have the koala t-shirt with me, Lady Overlaw'd, and the Labrador. We've got my Have a Cup of Concrete shirt. Have a cup of concrete and harden the fuck up. We've got Behold My Flying Rat's Ass. I'm particularly proud of that one. Yeah, Bush. Still waiting for a member shirt. You'll be at 24 months before the 12-month one shows up. Yeah, probably. I'm still not sure what I was thinking with this, but still horny but dead inside. Boomer's grifting. How the fuck did that happen? I know, right? That's a hard F. Love it. Oh, of course it's a hard F. Got hats, lady shirts, jumpers, all that sort of stuff, and I'm adding extra things. There's gonna be some stuff up there to make fun of Stingy, and the emus didn't spam. Oh, probably because I'm on this page. Sorry, the emoji thing isn't on this page. Sorry, I'm still working on various things. There will be some added things, but I just wanted to say this is here. And where's the link to the shop? I will post it in chat, but it is AussieOverlaw'dmerch.com. There we go. The article is just a complaint that men have left public sphere so they can no longer be accused of falsely have their lives ruined. The writer is upset. Me Too's gone. Probably. So, need the Pledge of Allegiance and the deaf freedom of speech shirt. They're two of the things that are on the way. Although, hang on, I need to remember the Pledge of Allegiance one. I've got the... I did have it written down. Damn it. Oh, there it is. So, yeah, some stuff will be going up. Handcuffing a deaf person takes away the freedom of speech. And I've got to remember the Pledge of Allegiance to the Aussie. Pledge of Allegiance to Aussie. There we go. So, if anyone is interested, you can go and have a look. There's various bits and pieces there. Apologies to the Aussies, but it is done through an American site, so the... what do you call it? The conversion rate on the Australian dollar is not great. But, you know, best of luck. Moving on. So, why toxic masculinity isn't a useful term for understanding all of the ways to be a man. I love that this was published in October, and ever since then, we have just gone incredibly downhill. There seem to be as many interpretations of what toxic masculinity means as there are uses of the term. Some believe it's a way to criticize what they see as specific negative behavior and attitudes often associated with men. Others, such as broadcaster Piers Morgan, claim that the media interest in toxic masculinity is part of the woke culture that aims to emasculate men. Others believe that toxic masculinity is a fundamental part of manhood. Write this. Okay, so, someone's research into working class young men in Wales shows how masculinity is changing. Some men remain hostile to the notion of toxic masculinity and see the term as a vehicle for shaming men. Well, yeah, no shit, you think? The dead inside mug would suit your partner. And some are caught in a conflict between changing ideas of masculinity and traditional unhealthy expressions of manhood. This is further complicated by the term itself. In its simplest sense, toxic masculinity refers to an overemphasis or exaggerated expression of characteristics commonly associated with masculinity. These include traits such as competition, self-reliance, and being stoic, which produce behaviors such as risk-taking, fear of showing weakness, and an inability to discuss emotions. That is now what they're saying is considered to be toxic masculinity. Because we get competitive with other blokes, so yes, there's dick measuring contests. There's a reason that I have a tape measure on my desk. There's a reason that it goes to... And apparently taking risks and not wanting to show weakness. Are you fucking kidding me? there's shorts that go around on YouTube of a guy going up to a woman who wrote a book, and he says to her, "You see those 3 women over there?" And he points to his wife and his 3 kids. "They would rather see me die on a hill than shed a single tear." Like, your stepson's 15, working on his old Nissan that he got for free, getting his butt kicked, so started yelling David Goggins and he got it done. Embrace the suck. Inability to discuss emotions. These have negative implications for both men and women. For example, a rejection of weakness and vulnerability may prevent some men from discussing issues such as mental health. Similarly, an inability to express emotion may expose itself through frustration, anger, and acts of physical violence. Now they're saying that because we can't share it, masculine traits such as being stoic can be equally be valuable in some circumstances, such as emergencies and making life-saving decisions. In essence, masculinity is complex, diverse, and can be expressed in multiple ways. However, masculinity that involves courage, toughness, and physical strength has historically been held in high regard by society. Masculinity is socially, historically, culturally, and individually determined and subject to change. It can be influenced by a person's status, power, place, social class, and ethnicity, so a person's differing circumstances establish or enable different expressions of masculinity. For example, traditionally high rates of manual employment in heavy industries and family relationships helped establish the gender roles of the male breadwinner and the female homemaker. This reinforced masculine traits such as toughness and stoicism in men. Hardest part's asking for help. Always is. Yep. In recent decades, though, the people in Western countries' work has changed a lot. Manual jobs have decreased while service sector has increased. These alterations have contributed to increasing the number of women working, and their wages have become an important part of household incomes. Movements like Me Too and brands like Gillette and its We Believe the Best Men Can Be advert have led to further examination of masculinity. They've challenged negative impressions of masculinity, encouraging men to change their behavior and adopt a more positive version of masculinity. Inability to discuss mental health, it's just what men do. They're told to shut up, deal with it, you don't matter. The article writer is a trash bag human. When shit hits the fan, are people going to wish for masculine men like your situation in Southport right now? A year and a half ago, I put together a video on men's mental health. And you know, I might see if I can pull it up and show it again. Because when I did it on somebody else's stream, there were women on the panel that as soon as they started hearing it, they started scoffing and rolling their eyes and all this sort of stuff. And works have been an embarrassment with their work ad campaigns. Yeah. You do acknowledge domestic violence, though? Of course I do. I absolutely. I deal with it as part of my job. I have no qualms with acknowledging that. What I acknowledge is that although it is far more prevalent to be male on female, it is not solely the realm of men beating women. Because women have zero toxic gender traits. Yeah. The Gillette ad led to them losing a huge market share and gave rise to several competing razor companies. Huh. Against this backdrop, we urgently need to reassess what the current research tells us about men and masculinity. Some studies suggest that men are changing their behavior as society and the economy change. For example, studies of white middle-class men who attend university have found that they are more likely to express their emotions verbally and physically. But critics say that the idea that such young men can transgress typical notions of masculinity because of their higher social status. Many women, not all, don't give two shits about men's mental health, just how much money they can make from him. Unfortunately. But hey, AP, this isn't here. I'm not here to turn it into a women bashing. I'm here because toxic masculinity is bullshit. Men being aggressive is good. Men being needlessly violent is bad. Stoic is usually good, but unemotional is not. Fucking tightrope is what it is. A new wave of qualitative research has shown that some working class men are changing their behavior. They are more open about their emotions and admit to feeling vulnerable and have more egalitarian views on housework. However, they still sometimes use sexist and homophobic language. Words. The difference between being manly and toxic is different. Yes, but they're not differentiating between that. When they say toxic masculinity, most of the time they're just referring to anything and everything that is masculine. No bashing woman was responding to your example of the woman scoffing at you bringing up men's mental health. No, I know. It wasn't specifically about UAP. I was just trying to temper the fact that... Ah, fuck it. It doesn't. See, I immediately just did it. Recent study is part of a growing criticism of how masculinity is defined and talked about. I carried out my research at a youth center and focused on a group of working class young men aged between 12 and 21. Okay, if you're going to phrase it like that, working class home life, because you made it sound like the 12 to 21-year-olds are all working themselves. Talked to the young men about their school experiences, work ambitions, and looked at their behavior. The study was based in the Gwent Valleys, a former coal mining community. Is a place known for its traditional ideas of masculinity, such as being strong and tough, but I found that these young men showed softer sides of masculinity, such as empathy, compassion, and sensitivity. These changes and softer sides of masculinity coexisted with behaviors often linked with negative expressions of masculinity, such as violence and crime. I describe this as the amalgamated masculinities. Okay. Make the thumbs down button great again. Not for my stream, you don't. We must be aware of the harm caused by exaggerated masculine traits, but language like toxic masculinity can be helpful. We should focus on promoting the benefits of positive expressions of manhood, such as emotional openness and empathy. We should also do more to work to try and understand why positive changes in masculinity are happening. Once we understand this, we can think about how to encourage these positive changes, making them more common in society. This could help make masculinity better for everyone. Now, just very quickly, I'm going to see if I can bring up the video that I and work out exactly whether or not I can manage to get myself copyright claimed by myself. Interesting. Oh, yeah, there it is. Now, so what I want to do is I want to clarify. When I made this, it was right around the time of certain news articles coming out about men's selfie-eating. And I felt that it was necessary to get the particular message out to as many people as possible, raise awareness, and put it in front of larger viewerships. As I said, a larger creator was very kind to show this video on their stream while I was there talking with other people. And pretty much most of the way through it, as I said, the individuals that I was on the panel with rolled their eyes, they scoffed, they laughed, right up until a certain point in the video. And then it was like, oh, well, now I look like a piece of shit. So.
Only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. Women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. A man is only loved under the condition.
What does it mean to be a man?
It means that no matter what you do, it's never good enough. We're supposed to pay for dinner. We're supposed to open doors for them. We're supposed to help them carry heavy stuff. We're supposed to call them ma'am. And nowadays, that's insulting. Means your mental health does not fucking matter. Male suicides make up 3 times the amount of female suicides. I was in the hospital for 11 days on suicide watch. They put me in counseling for maybe 2 months, and then they just sent me on my way. And guys don't open up about their problems because nobody fucking cares. You're just told to get up and walk it off. So why even bother opening up about it, right? It means every time you meet a woman, she automatically thinks that you could possibly be a predator and they have to carry pepper spray and tasers to defend themselves against you. No matter how good we are, a woman could easily just divorce us, take half our money and our kids. If you're unhappy in a relationship, that's your own damn problem. But if a woman's unhappy in a relationship, that's also your fucking problem. Basically, you better be able to provide or you're a loser.
It's okay to be a man.
It's not okay. It's necessary. What the hell are we going to do without men? You look around the city here, you see all these buildings go up, these men, they're doing impossible things. They're under the streets, working on the sewers, they're up on the power lines, in the storms and the rain. They're keeping this impossible infrastructure functioning, and often literally. And the gratitude for that is sorely lacking, especially among the people who should be most grateful, failing to understand entirely that there's a massive infrastructure of unbelievably hardworking, solidly laboring, working class men breaking themselves in half on a regular basis, making sure that everything that always breaks works. And so a little gratitude for that is in order. And it's very useful to tell everyone, not just men, that they have an important role to play, a necessary role, and that if they act properly and honestly and forthrightly, that they can put their lives together and they can help their families and they can make their communities better, and that that's not toxic masculinity, that appalling phrase. It's what keeps the world going round.
Be honest, who do you call when you are at your lowest? Who is that one person?
Nobody. I'm a man. No one cares.
Not a single soul. Nobody.
No one.
I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I don't call anyone.
Nobody. I'm a guy. Nobody gives a shit.
Speaking for the guys when I say this, literally no one.
Y'all call someone?
Nobody. Just nobody. Got no one to talk to, so nobody. You cares? Nobody.
No one. I'm a man. No one cares.
No one. Not a single fucking person.
I wouldn't call anyone. I wouldn't turn to a single person on this earth because they don't care. They will just find a way to use it against me one day.
We can call somebody?
So, I put that out at a time when it was poignant and in the news and that sort of thing, and... Oh, thank you, Shit Document, that's very helpful, because I never really had the opportunity to do that at the time. UK Helpline 116123. Not gonna lie, that sort of derailed me, but derailed by my own damn video. That's why I just don't... And you know what? Ironically, a lot of people could turn around and say that a lot of what we just saw in that video itself was an example of the result of toxic masculinity. I would argue that a lot of that was a result of toxic femininity. Particularly, you can tell that there's one guy in there that said, I can't talk to anybody because they'll just use it against me. And I don't think it's necessarily an appropriate way for life to be done. So the last thing I will do on this topic, and then I'll play Stingy's video to play out, because I know Jeff's doing Maritime Monday. Lefts don't want to hear that. Of course not. Hulk Hogan is not the only way to be a man. The Democratic Party must join the battle for the hearts and minds of young men. Why start now? It matters not just for the election, but through the vast and growing gender gap means that disaffected men could hand Donald Trump the presidency. I wouldn't be worried about it just being disenfranchised young men handing Trump the presidency. I wouldn't stress, honestly, mate. Excuse me. Matters for how we mentor young men. It makes matters for how we view masculinity itself. And yes, the Democrats can do it. Within the Kamala Harris coalition, there are men who can show a better way. How am I supposed to actually make it through this without laughing? If you ever wondered whether the Republican Party sees itself as a party of men, I'd invite you to rewatch the last night of the Republican National Convention. Primetime features a rousing speech by the wrestling legend Hulk Hogan, a song by Kid Rock, and a speech by Dana White, chief executive of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, all as a warm-up act before Trump delivered his acceptance speech. Republican manliness was the capstone of the convention. What kind of men were featured? They're all rich and powerful, and as a long-time fan of professional wrestling, I loved watching Hogan as a kid, but none of them are the kind of man I'd want my son to be. White was caught on video slapping his wife. Kid Rock has his own checkered past, including a sex tape and an assault charge related to a fight in a Nashville strip club. Hogan faced his own sex scandal after he had a bizarre sexual relationship with a woman who was married to one of his close friends, a radio host who goes by Bubba the Love Sponge. So was Ali, or was, so is Rocky, though fictional. We know all about Trump, but it's worth remembering some of his worst moments, including a jury finding that he was liable for SA, his defamation of his SA victim and Access Hollywood tape, and the countless examples of his cruelly insulting women he so plainly hates. J.D. Vance is different. No one should denigrate his personal story. He's overcome great adversity and served his country honorably as a Marine and by all accounts as a good husband and father, but now wears Trumpist masculinity as an ill-fitting suit. Last week he was justifiably attacked for the 21 interview with Tucker Carlson, in which he declared the country is run via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies. He identified Harris, who has 2 stepchildren, as just the kind of person he was talking about. For a brief period last week, I thought Harris might answer the Trumpists with a man who puts to shame every person who took the stage on Thursday night. He was reportedly considering Alderman, Admiral William McRaven, a Navy SEAL, a former commander of U.S. Special Operations Command and one of the key architects of Operation Neptune Spear, the mission to kill Osama bin Laden, as a potential running mate. And Hogan made a shit ton of money from the tape lawsuit. Now would be a good time to remind our studio audience that losing a civil case just means the other side did a feather's weight better than a coin flip on the preponderance. That's a good point. Keep in mind, people, that it's the stupidest thing as well. The fact that the judge said that the judge's ruling in a civil case now means that Trump could be labeled a felon or someone that committed sexual assault. That's proponents are the evidence, people. Literally 50.0001% more likely to have occurred than not. And I don't necessarily believe it in that case anyway. Trump was found not guilty on SA. The jury found him not guilty, but guilty of defamation, which doesn't make sense. It was like they defined him guilty on something. Writers just upset Trump, and the Republicans are now using Democrat tactics. Only his side's allowed to use those methods. He pulled himself out of consideration, saying that there are far better candidates for the position. Politically, he's probably right. Realpolitik requires picking a politician who can help carry key swing states, but McRaven still matters. His ideas matter, his comportment, his bearing matter. What he says matters, and Democrats should embrace McRaven's concept of how to live as a direct contradiction to Trumpist masculinity. Not just McRaven, of course, there are other good and brave men who rejected MAGA. Whether I'm speaking of Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, a former fighter pilot and astronaut, or Mark Hertling, my former division commander in Iraq, who was a Biden appointee to the American Battle Monuments Commission, and a leading proponent of Ukraine's cause, or James Mattis, a former Secretary of Defense, who did his best to serve Trump honorably before he could not abide Trump's disloyalty to our allies. What is this? But I highlight McRaven for a reason. He was perfectly articulated how to attack MAGA masculinity. 10 years ago, he gave one of the most powerful commencement speeches in recent American history. He addressed the graduates of the University of Texas in Austin, and 3 YouTube versions have racked up more than 70 million views combined. It's known, oddly enough, as the Make Your Bed speech. While it wasn't aimed only at men, every person who forwarded it to me was a man. It appealed to universal values, and it connected with men I know deep at a profound level. At a deep and profound level. 9 years of crapping all over Trump, and one cat lady comment sends the left into a meltdown. McRaven draws on his SEAL training to teach students how to change the world. It begins with small things like accomplishing the tiny first task of making your bed, because if you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And I will echo that, particularly on the days when you're struggling, and this applies equally to men and women. On the days when you are struggling, on the days when it is hard, on the days when you just don't want to get out of bed. That's all you got to do. Get out of bed, fluff your pillow, and you've accomplished something for the day. And even if that is all you do that day, you've still done something, and you should be proud of that. Trust me, it helps. If you want to change the world, don't back down from the sharks. The address builds to a conclusion that is alien to Trumpist masculinity. Start each day with a task completed. Find someone to help you get through life. Respect everyone. Know that life is not fair and that you will often fail. But if you take some risks, step up when the times are the toughest and face down the bullies. Lift up the downtrodden and never give up. If you do these things, the next generation, the generations that follow, will live in a world far better than the one we have today. I'm just reading chat. You can see the contrast. Trumpist masculinity is rooted in grievance and anger. Is it, though? Craven's message centers on honor and courage. There's a seductive quality to Trump's masculinity. Grievance is a form of counterfeit purpose, and anger is a form of counterfeit courage. For a time, your grievance can give you a mission, fighting the hated foe. When you're in the midst of an online temper tantrum, taking all the corners of your social media feed, you can feel a little bit brave, even if all you're doing is tapping out vitriolic posts from the safety and comfort of your couch. Dude, aren't you the one that just wrote this? When you center masculinity on grievance and anger rather than honor and courage, you attract men like Hogan and Kid Rock and White. Worse, that is how you mold men in your movement, including men like Vance. Many conservatives rightly decry the way in which parts of the far left tend to use the word straight white male as a virtual epithet. Damn it. As if there was something inherently suspect in the identities of tens of millions of men and boys. And if the men feel that Democrats are hostile to them, they'll go where they feel wanted, the gender gap will become a gender canyon, and more men will embrace Trumpism because that's just what men do. But that's the masculine equivalent of a sugar high. For solid food, look not to Hulk Hogan, look to William McRaven. It's often said, and I generally agree, that politics is downstream of culture, but we cannot ignore the culture power of our politicians. We aren't simply electing women and men. We're electing role models, and Trump has unquestionably been a role model for countless men. He's molded not just the policies, but also the ethos of the Republican Party. But America's men need different role models and different ethos. Yeah, fathers. Or better yet, worst case scenario, scout leaders, troop leaders, men that you can look up to and you can model yourself after. Is that article in the New York Times? Yes, it is. Trump masculinity. When you get shot, you stand up and raise your fist. If I make you laugh... something today. Like that one too. Not the only person who sees this need. At The Atlantic, my friend Tom Nichols, who's also written about the dangers of Trumpist masculinity, so someone else's left wing, obviously, argues that men like Kelly, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky, and Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina, don't know why I did that, also offer better models of men than Trump, and Nichols is right. But let's return for the moment to the Navy SEAL who served his country for decades, who helped kill one of America's deadliest foes, and who declared American college graduates, you must have compassion, you must ache for the poor and the disenfranchised, you must fear for the vulnerable, you must weep for the ill and the infirm, you must pray for those who are without hope, and you must be kind to the less fortunate. Get that was a graduation speech, right? He was always going to put specific things in there. Men bad, woman perfect. Pretty much the story of today. Roy Cooper's a clown, North Carolina's a mess. When I heard those words, I thought that's a message that Americans need to hear. That's a message the American people need to hear. This might sound strange, but I wonder if Democrats should answer the Republican Men's Night with a Men's Night of their own. A night that features heroes instead of bullies and showmen. A night that answers Republican appeal to men's basest instincts. If you're on the left, you will understand when I say you can't have a men's night if you can't define what a man is. Funny how I've never looked to anyone but my own father for how to treat others. Writers just blatantly stating that men don't have heroes to look up to and assume Trump is their only option. Yep, there you go. My role model was my dad, not some random guy, as was mine. This author wants to be a whiny bitch like Jeffries. When Vance says our people hate the right people, that's the language of grievance and anger. But there's a better way for men, for all of us. It's rooted in honor, courage, and love. Or as McCraven put it, for what heroes give so much of themselves without caring for those they are trying to save. You don't like the intentional feminization of men? David French, well, that should tell you enough, is an opinion columnist writing about law, culture, religion, and armed conflict. He's a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom and a former constitutional litigator. Yes. Okay, back to the original video. That. Oh, I still got to talk about the Mona article. Gonna make me moan. Get through this quick. Supremacy of men to be argued in court at Mona's appeal against discrimination ruling on the ladies' lounge. Quick thing for anyone that doesn't know about this one. Mona is the Museum of Art in Tasmania in Australia. The guy who owns its wife is an artist, and she decided that she would block off part of the museum and make it ladies only without telling the men. One man who bought a full fee ticket was very disappointed that he was unable to see a number of Picassos and other, historical artworks that should have been available to the public. He took it to court, won, and now they're appealing, basically saying that the point of the artworks was for it to be experienced as discrimination. Now look, I don't feel like that serves any purpose to bringing equality to things. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, this isn't a discrimination case. To me, this is a commercial case. If you pay full price for something with a full expectation that you will be entitled to something, either terms displayed and delivered up front should specify you are not going to see part of the museum, or there should be a discount on the ticket. Long and the short of it for me. I see this as a commercial matter, not discrimination, frankly. Tasmania's Museum of Old and New Art, Mona, will argue about the supremacy of men in the Supreme Court in a bid to reopen its women-only art installation, the Ladies' Lounge. Mona closed the Ladies' Lounge earlier this year when the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal found that it had discriminated against a man by not allowing him entry into the space. Court documents show that Mona is appealing the decision on 12 grounds, including that the tribunal failed to consider that the Ladies' Lounge artwork sought to address current and ongoing gender imbalances, including the continued existence of spaces associated with power, such as elite men's clubs. The power of the world lies with men, the supremacy of men in general, and the societal disadvantage of women. They look like such a fun bunch, don't they, just? Can't block people from paying to view art, then stop them from seeing the artwork. That's not correct at all. Yeah, breach of contract. During the tribunal hearing, Mona curator and artist Kersha Kashele described the Ladies' Lounge as a room enclosed by green silk curtains, watched over by a concierge that welcomes women and denies entry to men. After the April tribunal decision, the museum was given 28 days to stop refusing entry to men. Instead, they chose to close the lounge for reform. And they put a freaking toilet in order to get around the issues. And saying, oh yes, no, it's not that we're denying men entry, it's that this is the ladies' room and that way we're able to discriminate. They have a fucking Picasso hanging over a toilet. If anything, I believe that the museum itself should have whatever license they have to have those on display revoked. Because I think that's disgusting, frankly. She said that 3 of the artworks that she had spectacularly demonstrate Picasso's genius to a... 3 of the artworks she said spectacularly demonstrate Picasso's genius to a female toilet. So it's not one Picasso that's on display in front of a toilet. It's 3. That's disgusting. In another twist, after questions from the Guardian journalist and the Picasso administration, the Picasso administration did get involved. She revealed the artworks were not by Picasso, but that she had created them. So you committed art fraud and then passed it off as Picasso work. Myrna has confirmed to the ABC that the forged Picassos have been removed from the toilets and are no longer on display. The family of the Spanish painter has said, while we can only regret the situation and the current overexposure, we believe that the matter is now closed. Tasmania's anti-discrimination laws prevent someone being treated differently based on an attribute or characteristic, like gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, or disability. But there are exceptions. A section of the Act about equal opportunities allows positive discrimination where discrimination levels the playing field or gives opportunity to a disadvantaged group. Why would you do that to Picasso? No clue. Former Tasmania Anti-Discrimination Commissioner and a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Tasmania's law faculty, Robin Banks, believes that there are strong grounds that the New South Wales man Jason Lau did not experience unlawful discrimination when he was refused entry to the ladies' lounge. But Dr. Banks said that if he did, the artwork should fall under the exception as something that promotes equal opportunity. Of course she does. Dr. Banks has written an essay on the issue for Alternative Law Journal with Dr. Alice Taylor from Bond University and Professor Beth Goldblatt from Sydney's University of Technology. There's a strong argument we think that Lau actually did have a very rich experience of the art. They're saying that his experience of not experiencing the art because of being a man is artwork itself, and that this is why I genuinely believe this is not a discrimination case, that it is a commercial case. Loud complained in the tribunal hearing that he paid $35 entry to Mona but didn't get to experience what was inside the ladies' lounge. Art isn't something you go into, it's something you experience, Dr. Banks said. The tribunal did not see that way, nor should they have. The unfavourable treatment of Mr. Lau extended beyond entry into the space as an artwork in itself of the inability to experience the artwork within, the tribunal's decision reads. Dr. Banks said while Mr. Lau was treated differently in terms of not being able to pass through a doorway, he experienced the piece as intended. It was that idea that the world does not treat that the world does treat women differently to men, and the experience of exclusionary triggers an emotional response. It's distressing, she said. But were legitimate artworks contained within this lounge? If there were third-party artworks that were on loan from any third party, that should have been covered by the price of admission. I guess he didn't experience it quite to the same extent as women do because it's a one-off experience for him, whereas many women, it is not a one-off, it's an ongoing thing. Do you honestly think that's going to cause any sort of equality, though? A little bit late to this particular conversation, but toxic masculinity is just another made-up Marxist theory. No universally accepted definition of toxic masculinity exists. Why not just avoid using the inflammatory term and just avoid people whose behavior is toxic to one but not necessarily the other? They did all this to own the patriarchy. Yep. A blind person doesn't say that piece of art is discriminating against me because I can't experience it the same way other people can, she said. Oh, you fucking did not. You just compared a blind person to gender discrimination. Having a cock does not mean you cannot see artwork. Similarly, a deaf person doesn't say not being able to hear a concert or music performance is unlawful discrimination against me. No, because they are fundamentally different. It's an installation piece, and how you engage with an installation piece will be different for everyone. Mona's lawyers will push the argument that the ladies' lounge was designed to promote equal opportunity by showcasing the artwork by a female artist and providing the experience of negative discrimination for men and positive discrimination for women. The court documents show it. We argued that it is a space free from the supremacy of men, imbalance of power, and societal disadvantages that exist for women outside the space. Dr. Banks said the tribunal focused on the disadvantage needing to be very specific, and she disagrees with the tribunal's interpretation of the law. The general disadvantage that women experience, the general exclusion from power in places that women experience, is a disadvantage, she said. She said the ladies' lounge promoted equal opportunity by educating people about that experience. It's continuing to educate people about that experience of exclusion, and one of the ways you help people change is by helping them walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. According to the appeals document, Mona will ask the Supreme Court to set aside the tribunal's decision that men must be allowed entry into the space. A hearing date has yet to be set. Exactly. If a blind person goes to an art museum with a friend, they go knowing their experience ahead of time. Just say you identify as a woman when she pushes back. Uno, you card that bitch. At one point, maybe still, I don't pay attention. discriminating by sex is art now? Apparently. Allegedly. Don't know, don't care, honestly. So there you have it, peeps. That's my take on toxic masculinity. As far as I'm concerned, people need to take a good hard look in the mirror. And as far as I'm concerned, if someone genuinely believes that boys in school are going to be raised with toxic masculinity, that's a conversation that they need to have with their parents, because it is up to the men in their lives to raise them as gentlemen and to instill proper values in them. That is not something that I believe that schools, or the government for that matter, should be interfering with. Yes, I believe that there is a certain generation where society as a whole has failed. That does not mean that... Would they let a blind man in? That's a damn good question. That does not mean that it is the government's place to traumatize a generation to fix one side of a problem that they clearly know nothing about. But in any case, people, I'm going to go to bed because it is now... Oh, wait, what the hell? It's only 11:37. What am I... You know what? I might play some video games or something. In any case, people, I'm going to get out of here. As always, please remember, you're not a piece of shit. Value and you do contribute to society, and thank you so much to everyone that has hit the... What do you mean society didn't fail? It was done on purpose. I consider society and the government to be different. Oh, yeah, hang on. Stingy had something he wanted me to show. Appropriate for me to play the damn outro after that. That was something. As always, people, you're not a piece of shit. You have value and you do contribute to society. I'll be back tomorrow, but as always, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm going to play the credits, but I won't play the outro. See you all later.